WarsawJS.
Today I'm going to tell you about Next.js. It's React framework for server-side rendering. But before we will start, I would like to ask in general who from current audience is working with Next.js or used it in scope of your production projects. Could you please raise your hand? So, okay, there are several people. For guys who didn't use that, I hope it will be useful for you, since I would like to tell about general concept of that Next.js. Yeah. And before we will start, I will introduce myself a little bit. My name is Dzianis. I'm a lead software engineer in ITCard, and I already more than 6 years working with React and Node.js related stack, and 3 of them, 3 years, I already work with Next.js. That's why I will try to share my experience with you. So today I'm going to tell you in general about server-side rendering approach and how it works. Why do we need that? I would like to tell you about use cases of Next.js. Why can we use that framework in general? And what is the purpose? What is the business needs for that framework? Why do we need it in general? Then I would like to share some tips and experience from my real production experience of using that framework, since I used it on several projects. And I can share pros and cons of that framework, and I would like to do that. And at the end of the conversation, I would like to highlight at least some technical benefits of that framework. We will not go in the deep details since we are time limited. So let's go. I would like to tell you about what possible approaches for rendering in our web application in general. So we have multiple of them. And first one, it is our well-known client-side rendering. When you load your application on client, and majority of the work we do on the client side. So it means that our client called to the server, we request some kind of URL for web application, we receive the page with empty HTML, and majority of work we do on scope of client side. So it means that we load all data on the client. It's one of the concepts. So single page application, it's one of the example for that case. Then we have server-side rendering. The same flow when we do the request from the client to the server, but as a result, we receive not empty HTML. So it's a mistake in the presentation, looks like. So it means that we prepare all necessary data in scope of requests on the server side, and we send the final prepared page with the data to the client. So it means that we do majority of the work on the server side in scope of data loading. And we have as well static site generation. It's the same approach of generation and building the page when we prepare the page on the server side, and then we just send it to the client. But the main difference between server-side rendering and static site generation is the moment when we generate that pages. On the server-side rendering, we do that per each request. So it means for every request that we try to make for our particular application, we will do that for every request. Our server will prepare the data for each request. For the static site generation, it means that we will generate our pages on the server on the build time when we build our application. So it means that on every request, user will see already prepared type of the page. So it's overall concept of the client and server-side rendering. So in case I will explain in trivial example when we try to load some kind of HTML on the client side. As a result, we will receive from the server empty HTML. All our connected scripts will do majority of the work in terms of data loading. And after that, data will appear and injected in scope of HTML. On the server side, we will receive already filled HTML with necessary content. So it means that content will already be sent from the server side. So what it looks like, it's trivial example, like let's imagine you requested a page for some car management, and you will receive already prepared HTML with data. Why it's important for ACO optimization? So it's set of best practices how your application will look like for search engines, for crawlers, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. So, and next point, why do we use Next.js? Right now, I explained in general concept of server-side rendering and client-side. And Next.js is a framework which helps us to implement server-side rendering in scope of React infrastructure out of the box. So, and Next.js is popular, and so Next.js help us to do both static site generation, as I already mentioned before, server-side rendering for the server preparation of data. It helps us to improve ACO and in general performance of application. And it is good from the developer experience point of view. You as a developer, very confident what framework you are using. It's convenient for you as a developer to use already prepared functionality out of the box for that framework. It's a basic points that I highlighted during that presentation. And when we're talking why do we need in general that ACO optimization or server-side rendering, we have right now in scope of our, work a lot of business domain like entertainment, e-commerce, marketing application. There are a lot of that. And for that type of applications, it's very important how your application, like how your pages in general, are working in scope of internet, in scope of search engines, in scope of Google, for example, right? And for that type of business domains are very important how users will be redirected to that particular application. So, and in terms of ACO optimization, Next.js and server-side rendering as well take care about how our application will perform and how they will be indexed for search engines, just to make sure that that product that we are implementing will have expected user flow and expected user traffic to that application. So server-side rendering, right, Next.js implements it, but is it something new? Not really. A lot of languages like PHP, Python, Node.js as well, every language that supports some template-based functionality already did that a lot of years ago. It is not something new. Server-side rendering already works a lot, but you had a chance to, before Next.js, you had a chance to implement your own implementation of server-side rendering with a custom setup of React and Node.js. But it was not so convenient for developers. It was not out of the box. You need to configure it. It was not so stable in terms of configuration. So Next.js, out of the box functionality for server-side rendering. But is it good for ACO, like for that set of best practices for crawlers and for your application? Is it really help to achieve that best ACO metrics? For sure, yes. And when we will talk what exactly Next.js can, what Next.js can exactly help us to do with that ACO optimization, let me mention it. First of all, Next.js help you to build a nice structure for URLs of application. It has dynamic roads, so it helps you to achieve a better result in scope of your URLs built-in. You can build Slack messages in any way that you want to do it, multi-language support in terms of localization, etc. So you can do everything that you would like to do in terms of URLs configuration. Then, when we're talking about content, and as already mentioned, like when we preload data in scope of server-side rendering, it helps Google crawlers to handle your web application and handle its content to understand what this page is about, like what type of content is preloading to that web application. So Next.js contains server-side rendering and static site generations out of the box. Both of that mechanisms are supported. Then, when we are talking about loading speed, Next.js helps us to achieve better metrics at the initial loading time, at the for general performing your application by built out of the box helping tools in terms of different components like images, fonts, etc. I'll talk about them below. So in terms of loading speed, what can affect to that? Next.js supports code splitting, and when we are loading initial bundle for Node Next.js application, it helps us to make dynamic imports just to reduce amount of the bundle and split it for the smaller chunks. So it reduces initial time to render in scope of performance report, and it's really help. It is not something new, but it's supported as well. Then Next.js cares about how images are rendered and how they optimized. I will talk about them as in a separate slide. As well, Next.js handles links preloading. I will talk about it as well on the next slide. It takes care about fonts and in general about performance metrics and conversion rate, because it's not the separate definitions. As soon as we will see our application on the browser, we will have better conversion rate in scope of our application. So let me show some example for you. I just Google random site in scope of Google. I try to make Lighthouse report in scope of browser. It's a basic tool, initial tool that helps you to understand performance of your application. It's not ideal, but for visibility, it's enough, at least for first steps. And as you can see, I just searched some site, made a report for that. It has something at the middle result in scope of performance, at the middle of accessibility, some not very good best practices, but from the ACO point of view, it's good. But from my experience, and when we implemented such applications with ACO focus, it's not really enough to have ACO optimized solution like necessary metadata, how to say, semantic implementation of your solution, etc., right copy. It's not enough. Google crawlers as well take care about how your application performs in scope of loading and in scope of interaction with users. And as you can see, we have a set of metrics here, like first, contentful paint, time to be interactive, speed index. And in case that values will be bad, your application will be not so good from the performance point of view in terms of Google reports from the different type of performance metrics for crawlers. So it means that we should take care about each about each metrics in terms of that report, and Next.js helps to take care about each of that items. I just highlighted here just for visibility that we can improve everything from that list using Next.js tools. So and my next slide will be about some example of bad performance, like not the bad performance, but issues that can affect that metrics, like incorrect images using, like you didn't set exact metrics, or some improvements possible are in scope of style and layout optimization, some other JavaScript-related metrics. And in case you will use correct implementation of images in scope of Next.js, correct implementation of fonts, correct approach for server-side rendering and correct splitting of what data you would like to show at first, you will reduce overall amount of Z performance metrics. And it means that your application will perform better in general. So, and Lighthouse tool is good enough in terms of that suggestions. Even it understands that your application is written using Next.js, and it can suggest, like, hey, instead of using native image HTML tag, please use Next.js image with such set of settings, that it will help to resolve such kind of issue. And there are a lot of suggestions that can be applied to that solution in terms of Next.js. So, list of some items that can help to improve that kind of report. And I will tell about each of them, but not in details. So, next link, it's item from the Next.js library that can help you to organize work with your links in scope of application. Like for better performance in scope of user flow, you can set some kind of preloading mechanism for links for better user journey. So it means, like, for initial load of the page, you will render your application, and that links that are highlighted in scope of your viewport in background can be preloaded. So it means that when user will click to the next link, it will more faster given to the user. So it helps to build more faster user journey in scope of your application. Next one is next head tool, something with that item. Yeah, next head. So it helps you to configure in general SEO related metrics like page metadata, page preview, images, description, title, all kind of data related to SEO metrics in scope of application. So you can configure it in scope of out-of-the-box component for application. Then next one is next image. Nice tool that really can help you to reduce time for browser to, render at correct way how images should be placed in scope of your browser. It can additionally help you to organize loading of your images in scope of application in case you have multiple loading stage for the images, or in case you have a lot of images, you can set priority for loading of them just to make sure that you will load only necessary type of data. So it helps to reduce loading time as well. Next one, it's flexible redirects. So it's item in general related to improvements, possible improvements of your application. So let's imagine a case. You implemented application with some set of URLs. It doesn't matter, like, let it be some car /ID, something like that. But then your business requirements was changed. And right now, you need to update your URLs in scope of your application. But your URLs already in Google, your URLs already crawled by browsers in sitemap, etc. And in case you need to tell crawlers, search engines, like, hey, in case you landed to the old realization of page, please redirect me in expected way to the new page with appropriate HTTP status like 308, and Next.js do it out of the box. So in case you need change any kind of redirect, expected redirect, and tell like to search engines that it is something expected, and attach some additional information that, hey, we need to replace it in future. Next.js can help you to do that. Then next item is next font. Like, it helps you to organize work with fonts and reduce unnecessary network request for Google loading. So it handle it out of the box under the hood, and it just reduce unnecessary network request. So it works with Google fonts and with your custom fonts as well. Then, as already mentioned, we have dynamic imports for code splitting. It just reduce amount of your initial bundle. So I guess it's clear. Then next item is built-in cache settings. Next.js helps you to configure, work with cache headers, with cache settings, which can help you to organize how your request or how your static content should be cached in terms of your application. So it's very easy to configure all necessary cache settings. Then one new feature from the last version of Next.js, of Next.js, its last version, it's streaming. Like it's mechanism that can help you to organize initial preloading of, let's imagine you requested your web application, right? And it helps you to show some kind of initial loading state or some information before your data will be loaded, and while data is loading in the background, and it will show that initial content. But as soon as data will be prepared, it will just stream it exactly to your page. So next slide is about in general. Okay, I mentioned benefits from the small items to improve your application, right? Server-side rendering is one of the mechanisms that can help you. All additional settings in terms of images, performance can help you achieve your goals as well. And I didn't mention something about static site generation. Everything was about server-side rendering. Next.js support that type of mechanism, but with nice, cool feature, it named incremental static regeneration. Like, as already mentioned, static site generation is mechanism for build time of process. Like, you make a build of your application, you have some static content in scope of your pages, and you just serve it to the user. But Next.js allow you to regenerate your statically generated pages without rebuild. So let's imagine that you have some kind of content that not frequently changed, and you need from time to time to update it, but without rebuild. So Next.js allows to do that. So we can build some kind of page with getStaticProps method, set revalidate value. In that example, it's 30 seconds. So it means that as soon as I will call that page, it will give me the old version, but in 30 seconds, for the new request, we will have new version of the page, which will revalidated. It's really nice feature that can help you to avoid unnecessary rebuilds of your static content. So, and why Next.js is good for developers? I mentioned only, benefits in terms of performance and in terms of applications, like why SEO is important and why server-side rendering is important. But as a developers, it's very important to understand that it is convenient tool that can solve your tasks, your problems, etc. And for me as a developer, it's very convenient to work with Next.js, just because it's React ecosystem. Everything from the React works in scope of Next.js. The same libraries, the same NPM, right? So everything that you can do in scope of React, you can do in scope of Next.js. Then routing. Since we have strictly defined way how should we work with routing in scope of Next.js, it allows us to follow the same rules for all application. Just we have rules and we know how to do that. Then zero config. It's pretty straightforward item. Like for me as a developer to start some kind of project with server-side rendering, I need to type few type of commands and I will use that concept. No additional configuration are required for that. There are a few more items like fast refresh. It works really fast in terms of implementation, even with 12th version of Next.js. The last version is 13. When we have Rust-based compiler, it works even faster. But anyway, faster fresh is really nice. As a developer, you will not see any kind of issues during the development. And for me, it's very important and convenient that some kind of problems that previously as a developer I solved with some kinds of tricky solutions, right now I can solve with solutions that Next.js provide me out of the box. And for me, for example, to organize images preloading, mechanism, it's easy to just use image component and configure it correctly instead of trying to implement something and to implement the wheel. And then last point from that developer action that I would like to highlight, it's Vercel implementation. It's a tool that was built by Next.js for deployment process, and I worked with that before in scope of one of the projects. And Vercel is their own system for deployment, built especially for Next.js ecosystem. One second, So it's just deployment tool. You can configure your CI/CD pipeline without any kind of huge, tricky configuration. It works perfectly for some kinds of not huge projects, for MVP, for proof of concept or something like that. It's my opinion. We worked with that, and to be honest, for the basic setup, it works ideally. You can clearly understand what is going on. You can control some kind of preview for deployment. You can take a look what you would like to deploy or something like that. It's very useful thing. But in case you would like to build some kind of complicated system, enterprise system with complicated production setup, multiple environments, or per feature branch deploy, some complicated environmental variables management, it will just not work because it's easy to start, but it is not easy to adjust it for your specific business needs of your application. That's probably that's only negative side that I can tell about it. 1 second. Oh, yeah. So here was a slide regarding it's easy to track build time. You can preview your deployment. It can show as a separate window. It's easy to connect to any Git control system, so etc. and so on and so forth. So what's next? I'll try to switch my slide again. Yeah. All my experience was based on versions 12 and below, and there were no any kind of major production issues as a framework. It did all necessary and expected job for us, and we, the developers, achieved all expected metrics in terms of performance, in terms of how it works in production. We didn't have any kind of issues, to be honest. And a few months ago, we had a new release of Next.js 13 version. And to be honest, I didn't try it on production. We're in process of upgrade to that version. Even it's stable according to the documentation, and we can use it. There are a lot of alpha, beta functionality in scope of the release, and we are still monitoring to try something on the production. But I would like to tell a few highlights for you that you can take a look in scope of that release. So there are few features that were added in scope of that release, and I briefly would like to highlight them so you can take a look in details in case you will have a chance to do that. So layouts feature, it helps us to more clearly set up code reusability between pages and how we can insert some kind of code per multiple pages. So it just for reusability functionality in terms of page building. Then React server components. So it's definition of code that we mostly use on the server side, and we don't want to lend it to the client side in case it is not used on the client. So it means that we can split our implementation of components to the server-side components and on the client-side components, and on the final build of the page that you would like to get from the server, that chunk of components will be just not injected to that build. Then streaming, I already mentioned, like a mechanism for loading page and then stream some kind of data. There are multiple variations for doing that. And according to the documentation, they are clearly defined, so you can take a look on them. Next font, as already mentioned, it helps us to organize fonts management and just reduce unnecessary network requests in case you work with some kind of fonts in scope of your application. And it does out-of-the-box optimization, how fonts are connected, and so on and so forth. And one last point is Turbo Pack from the latest version. Latest version has new compiler based on Rust, and comparing with Webpack, it's much more faster. Again, according to the documentation, I tried locally. Definitely, it worked faster, but as a developer, it is not something significantly improved, right? Because even when you work with Webpack, you don't sit and wait while your application will be rebuilt, right? But it works even faster, and it's good. So what's next? What I would like to say by that presentation. As you can see, I didn't share in details any kind of technical questions because, I mean, we are limited. In general, I would like to highlight what this tool is about and when and why you can use it. So for me, I worked with Next.js in scope of multiple projects. And I can say that it is modern framework with a huge community, with huge demand right now on the market. And it solves a lot of issues and problems under the hood. I mean, it takes care about performance. You can do some kind of tweaks, improvements for your application in case you need it. It's easy to start and really easy to implement some kind of solution as a developer. So it helps you to achieve your business needs at first. And what negative sides I can share regarding that? As already mentioned, Vercel, it's again part of the Next.js anyway, because it's a tool for Next.js. It works, for my opinion, only for basic setup. In case you have something more complicated, it will just not help you to make your life easily, not really. And one more point, it's not a negative side. In case you think that Next.js will do everything instead of you as a developer, it's not true. In case you would like to achieve better performance, better results, and you think like server-side rendering will do everything, and it will help you to achieve best score in scope of performance, ACO metrics, not really. You can do build of your application in scope of all possible ways to improve it, not only server-side rendering. So please take care about all possible chunks of improvement that you can apply. That's probably was my last slide, and that's time for questions.
No questions? Oh, here we go. You remember what I said, right? Okay. Here you go.
So you're talking about Next.js, it's all nice and sweet, but are there any caveats or the use cases you would not select Next.js to solve your problems?
It's a good question. First of all, selection of your framework or tool in general depends on what you would like to build. In case you will have requirement to build any kind of B2B solution, like business solutions that will not take care about performance or about server-side rendering approach, like you can load everything on the client, it does not make any sense to use that tool in terms of, server-side rendering and performance. You still can use it for developer experience, right? But you should think about it. Why do you use that? Not only just because it's popular or something like that. You should solve exact problem by selection of your framework.
Question here. Thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting to see that. On the other side, regarding the Vercel was created specifically for the Next.js, and that's why it supports all of these beautiful features which you described, the images, the fonts, all that stuff, incremental site generation. When the Vercel appeared, probably all the other providers were not supporting these features. From my knowledge, it's still quite difficult to achieve that performance, to achieve those features on other providers, AWS, all the other stuff. Mm-hmm. So I was honestly surprised when you said that you use other places to host your sites. And I was simply interested, how difficult is it to adjust to them? How difficult is it to configure? What are the biggest challenges in that field? So not the development itself, but the deployment rather. Yeah.
Okay. Just checking.
Yeah.
You got the question? Okay.
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. Let's imagine, we are not implementing only Next.js application, right? We are working in scope of businesses that has a lot of application. And in case you have all infrastructure in scope of AWS, and you just want to have something on the Vercel, and you don't have any kind of chance to communicate between those systems, it make a lot of pain to support both, right? And in our case, when everything are landed on the AWS, we decided to store everything on one place. And for sure, something cannot be supported or implemented in scope of custom setup, even on AWS. But in majority of cases, when you are talking about supporting system with multiple pieces, it's easy to configure something on your custom domain setup, right? Rather than try to additionally support two directions. That's the main, item that I would like to highlight.
Some of the most difficult
We can talk about it after.
Yeah. Hi, Dennis. Thank you for your awesome presentation. I have a cool question for you. For such a long time developing Next.js applications, have you ever faced with an issue of random things in Next.js? Because there are kind of problem with rehydration while you're trying to render something in your application, and on the server it will be rendered in one way, and while having it on the client side, it will be the other way.
Good question. To be honest, I didn't face with such kind of issues. That's why I can't answer as you want to hear something specific. But I would say that we had some kind of problems with latest release of Node.js, like 18 version. Implementation of get server-side static props or something like that. I don't remember yet which exactly method was affected. It just decided to not work, just because Node.js of 18 version has experimental fetch method, and it doesn't work in that way right now. Exactly 12 version of Next.js with latest version of Node.js. So we just disabled experimental fetch for that functionality. But for your initial question, no, we didn't have any kind of problems with that.
We can talk on that.
Yeah, okay.
Last question?
Yeah.
So, hello. Nice presentation. I have a question. How hard do you find to transform an app written in pure React with also TypeScript into a Next.js app, and why? What are the harshness? What are the pros? What are the cons? And so on.
So sorry, question was...
That's 1.5 questions. Can you ask that again?
how hard do you find it to transform a React TypeScript app into a Next.js app, and why? What are the hardness of this?
Yeah, from my point of view, it's, not complicated mechanism at all, because, flow for, how to say, React ecosystem, right? Next.js support TypeScript. It's not a problem at all, right? The only way is that you should take care about how you will organize your routing, just because you need to re-implement your custom routing setup in React application for the Next.js realization. And you need to just change way how you retrieve data. Rather than that, I don't see any kind of blockers of that migration. It's pretty straightforward.
Dzianis, you have another one? Okay. Try to keep in mind which one was the most difficult. Okay.
I tried to use Next.js, and I tried to use the framework, and it was kind of tricky to connect it to the database, to MongoDB or something like this. But the question is like this: when should we have like separate backend and separate frontend, or when should we implement the whole logic on Next.js and simply don't have any backend? Maybe in common view backend.
Okay, let me think. So, in general, let me describe how we work, right? Let's imagine like you have a basic API set, it will be REST API or something like that, that's written on any kind of backend language, .NET, Node.js, Python, etc. And we usually work in we build in a setup, Next.js as a, part of the front end, and we use external APIs. We are not trying to build Next.js as a, monolithic application with everything on one place, like request, database, etc. I didn't saw such kind of implementation when you try to get the data from the Next.js implementation directly from the database. So I would say that it's more convenient when you have a separate backend for that, just because let's imagine, okay, today we have Next.js, right? But in 2 years we will have something else, and in case you need to upgrade it, it will not work.
Right. Always think about what might be next. I think it's that's a good advice. That's really good advice. Okay, Dzianis, so you have an idea of which of these questions was the most difficult to answer?
Most difficult to answer, probably the last question. Yeah, it's just, I need to think about it. So
you need to think. You decided, though. It's a decision.
Yeah, I already decided. Yeah.
Here is something that just appeared out of heaven for you, sir. All right. So thank you very much. No one else. We're done with that. Thank you all. Oh, we have. Oh boy. Okay. Dzień dobry. To jest pan Artur, jesteś? Pytanie? Okay. Here we go.
So hi, thank you very much for your talk. So I've been thinking about the hardest question I can ask.
It's too late, you missed the boat. Anyway, go ahead.
It's great, but do you happen to know what are the bad practices Next.js is forcing us to use from software development? And if there are some, you can just give one, and how we can get rid of it. Thank you.
Did you just run in here to ask that question? What are the worst things that they're making us do? Oh, please answer.
Good question. Next question. I don't know, to be honest. I try don't follow bad practices, right? And I would not try to advise something in terms of bad practices. I just simply don't know, to be honest. Yeah.
I think that was an appropriate response. What are the worst practices? Well, we try not to focus on the bad practices, actually. Best practices. Dzianis, that's your name. Thank you very much. Great presentation. Fantastic. Give him a hand, everybody. All right.